Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man who suffered from an accident as a teen starts to experience nightmares when he turns to a stranger. So, how did you meet your partner? Because I met a nightmare girl right here on Reddit.
When I was in my teens, I was in a car accident. I was on my way home from a friend's house when a car hit me at 40 miles per hour. It wasn't a direct hit, but they slammed me over the side of the road, breaking both my right arm, right leg, and 2 ribs. Hadn't it been for my helmet, I would have cracked my skull open. Still got a nasty concussion though. The rehabilitation was gruesome. I ended up in a deep depression, effectively losing an entire year, while my friends went off to high school. I was hopped up on pain meds and had 3 sessions of physiotherapy per week. I ended up with a chemical imbalance, throwing my mental stability out the window. Everyone thought it was just me being a bit down about the whole recovery, but it was far deeper than that. I was falling behind all my friends and I was feeling left out. It left some permanent scars. Anyone who has suffered from depression knows that you don't get just one symptom. It is all kinds of things, and it varies. One day you can barely get out of bed, another day you just can't stop crying. You can get panic attacks just from getting in the shower. You're just so much more vulnerable, you know? But for me, the worst part was the nightmares. I just couldn't relax, and I'd get these vivid, monstrous nightmares every single night, over and over. They were horrid and gruesome. Being buried alive and having to eat my own body to survive, being at a party, having my eyes keep falling out of my skull, and I had to crawl along the floor hoping no one stepped on them. These kinds of nightmares came to me every day. I grew so accustomed to them that I just stayed up as long as I could at night, instead falling asleep in the middle of the day. My parents thought I'd developed narcolepsy. As I recovered, most symptoms eventually went away. As my body healed and I started getting back into a routine, I improved rapidly. I could play basketball again, I got my social life back, and I started enjoying music like I used to. One by one, my symptoms went away. I no longer considered myself depressed, and my doctor agreed. It took time though, a long, long time. But the nightmares never really went away. I just adapted. Over the years, I got more and more used to waking up in a cold sweat. I started keeping sleep timers that I strictly adhered to, and I abused caffeine in the afternoon on days where the nightmares got the better of me. Over time, I started forgetting what I'd even dreamt. I'd still wake up sweaty or with a heightened pulse, but it would rarely go so far as to wake me up. I'd just get up in the morning with that feeling of unease. But just like any kind of wound or disability, you never really get used to it, but you adapt. But high school made way for the real world eventually. I made my way through a few community college classes and landed an apprenticeship as a plumber. I'd also help out as a bartender on odd weekends. I wasn't living the high life, but I was making do and saving a little bit every now and then. Gotta love small town living. I tried to find ways to deal with my nightmares, but I never really found anything permanent. Painting, writing, even boxing. It was all just temporary release. Over time, I'd adapt to that too. And the nightmares would come back. It made it really difficult for me to have someone stay the night, as I was scared for them to hear me scream or cry in my sleep, something which persisted for my teenage years. Hell, if it is bad enough for the occasional neighbor to complain, I couldn't imagine how bad it'd be for someone that shared my bed. I first started posting on Reddit a few years ago, just to see if there were other people out there who suffered from the same kind of nightmares as I do. I got in contact with a few other people that had also wrestled nightmares on and off for several years, and they had all kinds of advice for me. There was the standard exercise and diet crowd, fine Jesus people, and of course, those who had no advice to begin with and just wanted to hijack the post to talk about themselves. But I got in contact with a few who seemed genuinely interested and had dealt with something similar themselves. They talked about various kinds of medication and long-term treatment, all with the perspective of keeping it manageable. During this time, I was finally starting my job as a plumber. I know it might not sound too exciting, but it was a great relief knowing I would have a steady job for as long as I want. People always need working pipes. That won't change anytime soon. The nightmares were still there, and my screams could get so bad, the neighbors pounded on the walls, yelling at me. I felt for them. I was trying out a few tips from Reddit, mostly relaxation and mindfulness exercises. I was improving for the first time in years, and I was actually starting to feel a bit optimistic. I was getting up earlier in the morning, I had more energy, and I could take on an hour or two of overtime, every now and then, without falling to pieces. All in all, things were getting better. Then I got in touch with Veronica. She was one of the people who reached out to me on Reddit. She told me she'd dated a guy with issues similar to what I was describing, and she seemed both eager and sympathetic. I had so many hang-ups about dating someone that it felt nice just to talk openly to someone about it. She talked about waking up to his screams and desperately trying to help. Also, that the nightmares wasn't what broke them up in the end. Him refusing to talk about his issues was, by far, the main offender.
But that shouldn't be a problem for you.
She wrote.
You seem very open about it.
I suppose I was, at least online. Over time, we moved on from Reddit to Facebook to texting. It became a daily routine to check in with one another. She was trying to help me understand and normalize my condition, and I was helping her get over a bad breakup. She just seemed like a genuine and caring person. After a few weeks of texting back and forth, we got a bit more open with one another. We realized we just lived about a 30-minute drive apart, and we were both curious about meeting up. We decided on a casual, non-date meetup, just to have a coffee and try out the chemistry. Of course, it wasn't that simple. Veronica was as kind as she was beautiful, and had a smile as warm as her hair was long. Just seeing her across the cafe made me fall in love with her. Then again, maybe I'd been in love all along. That might just have been the first time I admitted it. That coffee turned into a long walk, a dinner, and a couple of glasses of wine. 13 hours later, I was standing outside her door, trying to pry myself away from her company. We just stood there, talking late into the night. I could have stayed there until sunrise, but we decided we'd meet again the next day. So we did. One thing led to another, and we started meeting every weekend. It wasn't long until the talking took a backseat to kissing and more. She was so warm and gentle, every movement deliberate and sensual. Sometimes I'd stay over at her place, sometimes she'd stay over with me. Within a month, I had a spare toothbrush for her in my bathroom. We were more often than not at my place. Hers was a bit impersonal. But it wasn't all roses and sunshine. My nightmares started coming back, with a vengeance. At first, I thought it was because I was excited or exhausted. I tried to explain it away, but it always came back to Veronica. The more time I spent with her, the worse I slept. Still, she was so understanding. She comforted me in the morning. She sat with me when I woke up at night. She was nothing but supportive, but it was getting unbearable. Veronica tried to make me relax. She figured I just had to adjust to not sleeping alone and argued that it would all go away in time. If anything, we just needed to spend more time together. To her, the solution seemed obvious. I wasn't convinced, though. My nightmares were worse than ever, and they weren't going away. Before, I'd forget them come morning, but not anymore. Instead, it felt like my mind was marinating in this constant, relentless unease. I'd dream about my hair turning into centipedes, biting me as I laid down. I'd dream about my brain melting out of my ears as I desperately tried to hold it in with my hands. I'd dream about dying in a fire, about drowning, about floating into space. 100 horrors, a new one every night. And in the morning, I'd still feel something. My lungs might hurt from trying to breathe in a vacuum. My skin might feel warm from the fire. The sensation would go away after a while, but the feeling would stick with me all throughout the day. And right there, next to me, was Veronica to cheer me up. She was always so cheerful in the morning. By now, most people I'd talked to online had gone away. I still had contact with this one guy in France, though, Antoine. He had almost the same problem as I did, but he'd finally found a treatment that worked for him. It was a pretty specific type of medication, but I decided to talk to my doctor about it. We figured we'd give it a try for 2 months. It was a bit costly. but if it could actually help, it'd be worth every cent. The next time Veronica came over, I slept like a goddamn baby. From the moment I rested my head, it was just lights out. No dreams, no anxiety. I bet my neighbors were happy as well, not hearing a peep from me for an entire night. It was like turning off a light and then just suddenly being awake again. It was a bit unsettling, just how effective it was. I couldn't help but laugh. It was so unexpected. Veronica was happy for me, for a little while. But over the next few days, she seemed bothered. She'd asked me why I was treating her differently and why I was acting strange. I told her about my new medication, and she didn't seem impressed.
I don't like what it does to you.
She said.
Not one bit.
There was a strange intensity to her, like her eyes had grown darker. I couldn't just stop taking my new medication. I was sleeping well for the first time in years, and I wasn't about to just quit. I had no idea what she was referring to. I was, if anything, more positive and energetic than I'd ever been. I was feeling attacked, seemingly out of nowhere, and I was having a hard time understanding it. For a few nights, I tried to stop taking the pills, but the nightmares just came back worse than ever. I'd dream about being strangled, waking up 3 or 4 times a night. Again, I'd wake the neighbors. I'd wake from my nightmare, hearing them bang at the walls. Sometimes I wouldn't wake. Instead, I'd dream about being impaled and slowly bleeding to death. All of a sudden, Veronica was back to her usual and caring self. If anything, it was getting a bit eerie. The worse I slept, the happier she'd be. She was nothing but warm towards me for the next few days. She'd practically moved in with me at this point, staying over almost every night. She'd cling to my arm when we went out. She'd give me kisses on the cheek while we were grocery shopping. She'd stroke my hair when we watched Netflix, and she'd be nothing but smiles all day long. But I was exhausted. I was falling asleep at work. I couldn't keep this up. I had to start taking the pills again. It was a Friday night after a desperately long week. We made some hot dogs, I took a shower, and turned in for the night. It was barely 9 p.m. when I finished brushing my teeth. I was standing with the sleeping pill in my hand when I saw Veronica behind me in the bathroom mirror. She was leaning in, her face as stiff as ice. I just stood there, holding the pill, meeting her eyes in the mirror. For a brief moment, I could have sworn they reflected the bathroom light.
Are you gonna start taking those pills again?
She said as casually as if asking how my day had been. I gotta sleep, I sighed. I can't do this.
You sure about that?
Yeah.
No, I mean, are you really, really sure?
I was having second thoughts. There was an ultimatum dancing in her eyes, and I was too tired for drama. I swallowed the pill dry, and as I turned around to face her, she was already heading out the door. I tried calling and texting her, but there was no response. Instead, I just turned in for the night. I was having trouble keeping my eyes open. That night, I had one of my worst nightmares yet. The pill did nothing. I dreamt I was in this eternal black ocean. My clothes were heavy, weighing me down. I could barely breathe, the waves slapping me left and right. Every other breath, I'd dip beneath the surface. The water was so dark, I couldn't see my own hands. I'd sometimes feel something big brush up against me. At times, something would tug at my legs or arms. Something sharp would poke at me. My flailing hands would poke against slippery surfaces passing by. I'd feel my body get pushed back and forth as masses of water moved. I could feel big things swimming past me in the dark. I woke up over and over and over, but I couldn't move. My body was still asleep, and I would start losing track over what was real and what wasn't. As my head reached the black ocean surface, I could see someone else. Someone swimming towards me. Something with skin white as chalk and coal-black eyes. Moments later, I'd be in my bedroom. I'd feel myself gasping for air. My arms weren't responding to movement. I'd try moving, screaming, but nothing happened. And there in the doorway was Veronica. Every time I blinked, it felt like she looked different. She'd be the chalk-white thing swimming towards me. She'd have the coal-black eyes. She wasn't even swimming or walking. It was as if she was being pulled towards me. The only clear difference that I remember with absolute clarity is that right there, coming at me from the doorway, she was smiling as wide as on that first casual non-date. She crawled into bed carefully, like a prowling hyena. As I closed my eyes, I'd see the coal-black eyes inches away from my face. Two worlds separated by the blink of an eye. A pair of delicate, stone-textured hands cupped my face, as if to kiss me, but no kiss came. Instead, she unfurled her lips into this grotesque circle, her teeth bending and flexing like a leech. I'd feel her cold breath on my forehead, saliva dripping down my face. She thrived on this. She fed on this. On me. All of a sudden, I was fully awake. My neighbor was once again banging on my wall. Had I been screaming? Veronica pulled back. She'd been leaning over me. She stared at me, her pupils so large that her eyes looked black. Her teeth were short and sharp, like a piranha. Slack-jawed, she crawled backwards. I couldn't find any words. As I sat up, she scurried backwards like a cockroach. For a few seconds, we just stared at one another. My breaths were short and shallow. I felt lightheaded. It felt like balancing on a knife's edge. She could attack or run at the drop of a hat. She was a cornered animal. Something salty dropped into my eye, and as I wiped it off, she ran. She was scrambling to get out as fast as possible, not letting anything get in her way. She knocked over a chair on her way out of the kitchen, along with 2 plates and a glass. I could hear her slam the front door open, using the entire weight of her body to gain a couple of milliseconds. For a few minutes, I just sat there, trying to remember how to breathe. When I finally looked down on my hands, I saw blood. There was a round bite mark in the middle of my forehead. I called the police and reported an assault, leaving out the parts that I couldn't explain. But apparently, Veronica was really difficult to get a hold of. She'd lived at a temporary address, and the name she'd used wasn't real. We didn't have any common friends and family, and the only trace of her left was a witness telling the police she'd rented a fully furnished apartment the same day we went on our first non-date. It was very possible she'd moved there just to get close to me. The only reason I had that final terrible dream, I later found out, was that she had replaced my sleeping pills with sugar pills. So much for placebo, I guess. I think she is some sort of predator. She stalks sites where people have terrible dreams. She feeds on them, gaining nourishment. And when she thinks she can't get anything else from you, she does something. Something for a last feast. I don't want to know what she would have done to me, given just a few more seconds. I don't think she's alone. Others have messaged me. Every now and then I still get random people who follow me, asking for updates. They are strangely enthusiastic about it. I urge you, be careful. You don't always know your word.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories, straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man finds himself mistakenly inside people's heads when he's placed in the way of danger. So, are you sick in the head? Because my mind is contagious.
I've always been a bit off. I grew up with my grandparents in the outskirts of St. Gall, Minnesota. You could call them hippies if you want. They were emotionally distant people. I could tell they weren't very close with their child, my mother, and they weren't happy with her decision to have me. Honestly, most of the parenting I got were from the other residents of St. Gall, this close-knit community of outsiders. And my parents? Well, I've never met them. My mother is in jail, possibly for life. Not sure why, but seeing as my dad is dead, I have my suspicions. Honestly, though, they've never been a part of my life, and I'm not going to start caring now. But I'm here to tell you about one of my most private and weird personal problems. Because of recent events, I've grown a bit existential. I thought it was about time I shared my story. My grandparents told me I had a skin disease, something that could transfer from one person to another if I wasn't careful when spending time with others. They had all kinds of fancy Latin words for it and statements from dermatology specialists. Looking back at it, I should have asked a lot more questions. I figured out it was nonsense by age 7. Either way, I was told to stay away from people and keep to myself. I had to wear gloves at the dinner table, and there were no hugs and kisses. Instead, I'd get a steady, gloved handshake when I did something good, and I was sent to the basement when I did something bad. basement had no books, which was punishment enough. Just a dark room where I was left to stew on my anxieties. During my formative years, I was homeschooled. I noticed that I kept surprising people with my ability to retain, observe, and use information. While my grandparents might quiz me on European history, for example, I not only knew the answers perfectly, I could discuss them, challenge them, and see patterns from other textbooks I'd read. They kept calling me a smart kid, but I've never really felt smart. I just see things and remember them. If that's all there is to being smart, then it's not that big a deal. Trust me. But it came to a point where I could no longer ignore it. People in the community came to me for help, and I started picking up foreign languages. I learned fluent Spanish watching Telemundo, and a lot of German from documentaries about the Second World War. Today, I speak 8 languages fluently. But being intelligent, whatever that means, is not just a boon. You're constantly second-guessing yourself, asking if there is a better answer. You're worried you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. Answers and the questions that precede them are never good enough. There is always another step to take, another angle to consider. Imagine being wrecked by constant doubt and insecurity. It leaves a mark on a person, and I'm no exception. I pretty much withdrew from other people. I couldn't imagine myself trying to help others. What if I guided them wrong? What if they took an unwittingly false statement as a fact? It is exhausting trying to be on the right side of knowledge and opinion. I was constantly on edge, withdrawing from St. Gall to focus on myself. I learned to find comfort in nature, mostly from a friend I made as a kid. It was an early morning in May, and the air was still thick with dew. I took a walk around the lake when I noticed this awful cry. The Toussaint couple had been setting up fox traps to protect their chickens, and something was stuck. I hurried over. At first I thought it was a small dog, but the shape of the paws were all wrong. Taking a closer look, I realized I was looking at a baby black bear. The mother was nowhere to be seen, and the little thing was screaming its heart out. I felt awful, but as I approached, it lashed out towards me. I tried to calm it down, and the strangest thing happened. The moment I put my hand on its forehead, it just stopped screaming. The little animal just stared at me, confused. Those big dark eyes locked onto mine, and I could tell it knew my intention. It knew I meant it no harm, I'm sure of it. It was just scared, confused, and in terrible pain. "I'll help you," I whispered. "You'll be fine." I made a mental checklist of all the things I needed. It might require stitches, bandages, maybe even a splint. I had to check if the leg was broken or merely sprained. It could be dehydrated, starved, or sick. I didn't see any signs of mange or other diseases, so I just pet the animal, whispering comfort. "I'll be right back." As I stepped away, it didn't panic. It knew I'd be back. I raided our first aid kit and spent most of the day caring for it. I didn't bring it back to the house, as I wanted the mother to have a chance to find it. Instead, I cleaned it, cared for it, and kept it company. The leg wasn't broken, but there was a deep gash. The bear also had a limp when he walked, understandably. I figured it might be permanent. Still, it seemed calm in my presence. In a way, I felt a connection to it. We understood one another in a way that people usually didn't. It listened. He'd lean against me and sleep as I practiced my Mandarin. I called him Wojtek, like the bear the Polish 22nd Artillery Supply Company adopted during the Second World War. I spent 4 days with Wojtek that summer. Every night, I'd tuck him in next to a large rock so no wild animals would find him. And every morning, I'd bring him eggs, toast, and bacon. My grandparents usually let me eat in my room alone, so they didn't notice me sneaking out to share my dinner. At the night of the 4th day, as I tucked in Wojtek, I heard this rumbling noise. A tree breaking. The sun was setting, and I didn't even notice the black shadow flanking me. I turned around and realized I was facing a fully grown black bear, and I was standing between her and her cub. As she stood up on her hind legs, I remember thinking that I didn't even have the time to panic. I almost laughed. My death would be so sudden I didn't even get the chance to regret my actions. I froze, looking at those enormous claws, the jaws large enough to swallow my head. As she roared, I could feel my body collapsing to the ground. I thought I'd die from the sound alone. Then I noticed Wojtek. He'd stepped out and placed himself between me and his mother. He stood up on his little legs, making this tiny yelp noise over and over. It almost looked like he tried to mimic me, even though it pained him to stand on his wounded leg. I just crawled into a ball and made myself as small as possible. Over and over, I heard Wojtek screaming at his mother. The air grew silent, like that feeling you get before a lightning strike. I held my breath as I heard trees bending and breaking. Looking up, I saw Wojtek limping into the woods, following his mother away from St. Gall. I don't speak bear, but I'll tell you, Wojtek saved my life. I'm sure of it. And that summer, I started spending a lot more time with animals. There was something so relieving about being understood, without having all these expectations looming over me. Animals are so simple and so grateful for so little. I started spending more time downtown helping out at the animal shelter and veterinary clinic. I knew my grandparents wouldn't approve of me spending too much time around other people because of my skin condition, so I just told them I was at the library. Which wasn't entirely untrue. I borrowed a lot of books on the anatomy of common domesticated animals. I can clearly remember the first time I helped feeding the dogs at the shelter. They'd bark and growl, but as soon as I stepped into the room, they just stopped. All those little eyes turning to me, staring as if they wondered what the hell they were even looking at. They were already listening to me, trying to figure me out. They knew I was there to help. When I was 16, my grandparents died. They died within 3 months of one another, and I was left with an inheritance I didn't know what to do with. I invested most of it, sold the house, and moved into a small apartment downtown. By now, I was a de facto and unlicensed veterinarian. Nearby farms would sometimes call me up and give me something off the books for my help. I can't count the amount of cows and goats I've treated. Most of the farmers called me Dr. Charming. You know, as in Prince Charming, similar to a Disney princess. I used my inheritance to pay for my college studies. My investments also paid off handsomely, allowing me some greater luxuries. I got my VMD degree ahead of schedule from MSU. I can honestly say that it was easier than expected, and I started to realize that many of my fears were exaggerated. I still lived largely separated from other people, though, and I didn't have many friends. I had a few acquaintances, and most of the nearby farmers knew me by name, but that's not really what I'd call a relationship. As I turned 20, I decided I would make a conscious effort to be more social and face my fears. I had known for years that I didn't really have a contagious skin condition. That lie wasn't really all that held me back. Honestly, I just felt like a freak. I'd get lost talking to other people, and it would be exhausting trying not to correct them. Instead, I'd just hold my tongue and stick to subjective topics. Music, film, literature, favorite actor, that sort of thing. It was during an after-work with the others from the vet clinic that I first met Veronica. I was an unkissed, unloved, and insecure virgin at the time. Veronica took a liking to me, amazed by the amount of random nonsense I could dig out of my brain. She described it as having an unlimited flower bed of trivia she could make bouquets from. I'd never heard anything like it. While our first meeting was short and awkward, our following 4 dates went by like a charm. We'd go for long walks, and she'd ask me all sorts of questions.
It's funny,
She'd say.
You could be a literal rocket scientist, but you can't pick up on sarcasm.
One thing led to another, and we started dating. Veronica was the charming and outgoing ice pick I needed to break out of my shell, and to this day I credit her with what little social experience I have. She was warm, understanding, and had no trouble explaining social cues I might have missed. It didn't take me too long to get a hang of it, and soon I could hold my own in a conversation with her friends. But things weren't perfect. After about a month, I remember waking up in the middle of the night to find her sitting at the edge of the bed, crying hysterically. She'd hold her face in her hands, shivering and unblinking. I'd never seen her do that before. As I held her, she just started speaking nonsense.
None of it matters.
She'd say.
We're nothing but walking wheat, broken clocks. We're useless, fragile, and so insignificant.
I'd try to calm her down, but it wasn't possible. We'd sit for hours, and she'd just spew these horrible existential anxieties. She'd have these mental breakdowns every now and then, several times a week, and she started recoiling from my attempts to comfort her. I made her feel this awful dread,
It just feels like you're gonna tell me something awful.
she explained.
You're in my head, and I want you out.
It worried me how much she reflected my own anxieties, and it was clear I was making her unhappy. My worst thoughts were coming out of her mouth. So we broke up. That relationship lasted a few months in total, but I couldn't get over it. The way I'd turned her from this happy-go-lucky and independent woman to a nervous wreck. It made me feel like an abuser. I had no idea what was even going on, and I couldn't tell what was wrong with me. I heard from a friend of a friend that she started taking Xanax and going to therapy. I'm not sure what I think about her therapist, Dr. Bogan. That woman gives me the creeps. Back then, I spent a lot of time with my work colleague turned friend, Jacob. He was a few years older than me and had just gotten his own VMD. He had seen a lot of the strangeness I brought to the clinic, and he was one of the few who didn't seem to mind or question it. He had this amazing laugh that could easily break the tension. I remember this one night we spent at the bar, about after a week after my breakup with Veronica. It was one of the first times I got really drunk. That bottle of blueberry wine felt like stepping on a goddamn landmine, and my shell just cracked wide open. I'd gush about how amazing she was, how she made me feel, how beautiful she was. I'd quote love poems by Burns and Keats, laugh, cry, and finish most of the bottle on my own. At the time, Jacob was nothing but supportive. He'd pat me on the back, he'd make sure I drank plenty of water, and he'd ask me all kinds of follow-up questions. He just wanted me to get it all out. He actually told me it was nice to see me act all human for once. At the end of the night, he helped me get back home. Before we parted ways, I gave him this big hug, and he just froze. 2 weeks later, I found out he and Veronica had started dating. Out of nowhere, he just started courting her. She'd appreciated the attention, and the two had gotten along. Jacob was absolutely smitten by her, and she had found someone willing to overlook and tolerate her exhausted mental state. The two of them just turned into this natural couple, like I'd never even been a part of the equation. Honestly, it kind of pissed me off. I quit my job and moved to the next town over. They, on the other hand, got married. I wasn't invited to the wedding. For a few years, that's been my life. I've been keeping to myself and spending time with the local wildlife. I've taken a few trips to Europe and reinvested my winnings. I've had a few short relationships with a handful of women, but as soon as I saw a hint of what happened to Veronica reflect in their behavior, I've had to leave. I've left a trail of broken hearts, and after a while I just stopped trying to justify it. I was being selfish. I couldn't keep hurting people just to get over my own insecurities. It wasn't until a Thanksgiving parade last autumn that I accidentally ran into Jacob and Veronica again. They had brought their kids, and I barely recognized the two at first. They looked so suburban. As Jacob's oldest son was waving a balloon around, I noticed Jacob staring at me from across the road. I figured enough time had passed that we could talk as adults, so we met up after the parade. It warmed my heart to see Veronica do so well. A few memories of her beautiful hair on the pillow next to me surfaced, and I felt this warmth in my chest. As she stepped away to help her kids use the restroom, Jacob approached me. He had this uneasy smile, something I'd never seen on him before. We shook hands, and his smile faded away.
You want to talk to her?
He asked. No, I just wanted to see how you were doing. Long time no see, you know.
Sure about that?
He chuckled, trying to defuse the tension. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to,
No,
said Jacob, nodding.
I get it. No worries, man. It's all history.
He looked down on his hand, blinking.
But if it's okay with you,
He continued.
I'd like for you to piss off and leave my wife alone.
I want to say that was the last time I saw Jacob, but that wasn't the case. He added me on Facebook so he could stalk me. He'd send me long emails, talking at length about how he knew what I really felt for his beloved Veronica. It'd be these absurd, paranoid rants. He'd ask me about my dreams, about my intentions, even creepy private things like how I'd touch myself while thinking about her.
That's my wife.
He'd write.
I know how you feel about her, and I'll wring your fucking neck if I see you looking at her like that again.
At first I tried to calm him down, but after a while I just started blocking him. Everything I said just made him worse, and I was honestly getting worried. Once I saw him drive past my clinic in the middle of the day. Had he really taken time off work to drive to the next town over to check on me? For what? To make sure I wasn't screwing his wife? He started leaving notes. He'd call me at work and send letters. He'd get new email addresses and get past my filters. I honestly considered calling the police, and I told him as much. Huge mistake. A few months ago, I was out jogging down a nearby trail. I was listening to a lecture on 40s filmmakers and had blocked out most of the world. It is nice just to keep my mind busy. It helps me compartmentalize my anxiety. As I was passing by a broken streetlight, I suddenly felt a push. I was knocked forward, scraping my hands and knees on the pavement. Surprised, I just thought I'd tripped on something. As I turned, I realized I was being attacked. It was surreal seeing Jacob there. He wasn't wearing his reading glasses, and he just stared at me with the same unblinking eyes that Veronica used to get. In his right hand was a pistol, pointed in my direction.
Get up,
He spat.
now.
1,000 possibilities raced in my mind. I had to comply, but I also had to make an escape plan. I could feel my thoughts kicking into high gear, brain locking itself into running 100 possibilities at once. I just stood there opening and closing my mouth like a trout out of water. My brain was drowning in thoughts on dry land.
Step off the path.
He continued.
Walk.
Why are...
You don't get to talk.
He screamed.
You don't get that privilege. You get to step off the path and you get to do what I say.
I nodded and started walking. Jacob's hand was trembling. I could hear the rattle of the fully loaded magazine. We stepped off the trail and into the woods, stepping over logs, bushes, and zigzagging between saplings. It felt like an eternity. I'd been waiting for an opportunity to dive for cover, but at this range, it'd be impossible for him to miss me with all those bullets. One or two, maybe, but a full magazine? No way,
I won't let you destroy my family.
he said.
I know you want her back. You should have listened.
To what? I asked. You pursued me. I haven't done anything.
Don't you get it?
He laughed.
You don't see it?
He steadied his aim as I backed up. He was being smart, not aiming for the head. It'd be a body shot. One wrong move and I'd be gone. It doesn't matter how many times you've imagined it. Facing down an unsecured barrel of a gun is like staring into a well of darkness, knowing that eternity waits to drag you to the bottom. I tried to force my mind to cooperate, to give me something, a solution, a calculation, something to guide me. Yet all that was left was insecurities, indecisiveness, and dread. This was real. This could be it.
Nothing fucking matters.
Jacob continued.
You and I were just jokers in a deck stacked against us. There's an entire cosmos of evidence that Jay just makes us...
He just screamed himself red. His eyes, bloodshot and unblinking, refused to look away.
I should never have taken pity on you. I should have left you to suffer, but I just fucking feel you. You're in my goddamn head opening these fucking doors. I don't want to think about these fucking things. I don't want to think about you taking her away from me. I don't want to think about how fucking dumb, small, and useless I am. Well, why does this keep coming back whenever you're on my mind?
Jacob,
No!
he yelled, aiming down the sights.
No more fucking poison!
I should have been dead. A bullet in the chest, left to die next to a birch sapling. That's what I anticipated, but that's not what happened. Had I gotten a better look, I would have noticed him sooner. A massive 540-pound black bear with a limp, enraged. The moment Jacob raised his gun to take a shot, he was bowled over like a rotten log. I could briefly see his legs and head switch place as he was knocked flat on the ground. 2 shots went off and his roar echoed through the woods. The same roar I'd hear that night when a baby bear walked away from me, all those years ago. I saw the whole thing. I saw Jacob's arm ripped into pieces as the bear bore down on him. I saw him dragged across the forest as that enormous bear jaw clamped down on his legs. I heard bones break as the bear stood up on his hind legs, only to push down with all his weight. Biting, clawing, mauling, breaking. A body tossed around like a wet paper towel, spraying blood in all directions. Jacob's horrible screams just suddenly stopped with the snap of a joint, but the bear wasn't letting up. He was tearing him apart. This wasn't just an animal attack. This was retribution. I just slumped to my knees. The bear limped over to me, unscathed, but covered in blood. The thought hit me that he might just be a wild animal attacking us, or protecting his territory, but I knew that wasn't it. There was no way this wasn't Wojtek, and there was no way he'd hurt me. Instead, I leaned my sweaty forehead against his cold nose and cried. He nuzzled up against me. Over the years, his little yelping noises had turned into deep, comforting snorts. "I'm sorry," I bawled. "I'm so fucking sorry." Wojtek kept me company and felt my pain. Jacob's death was labeled the result of a wild animal attack. Veronica had told the police about his deteriorating mental state, and a few locals had heard shots go off just as a bear roared. The conclusion was that he'd probably provoked the bear. I didn't say a thing. There was no need to try and explain my involvement. There was no way they'd believe me anyway. I've tried to summarize my thoughts about this. They're not rational, but I don't think there's anything rational about my life at this point. I think my mind is somehow contagious. I think my mood, my mindset, and worries can spread. Animals don't really have the capacity to understand my anxieties, so they just pick up on my immediate intentions. They understand the basics, they don't need the rest. But people? People are complicated. I think Veronica picked up on my worries, social and otherwise. I think it caused some sort of short circuit in her ego. And Jacob, well, the first time I hugged him, I must have shocked his system with my thoughts of Veronica. Maybe that's what caused him to pursue her in the first place. Maybe seeing me again and shaking my hand reignited something that had laid dormant for years. I don't know if I can trust myself around people. It is so much easier to write, to share things online. No one gets hurt. No one gets intrusive thoughts. You can just lean back and call bullshit on my story. I don't know what to do, how to move on. Can I even see a therapist? Either way, I think I'll be alone for now on. Then again, as I look to the woods, I know there are those who care.